All right, another game then between Coop and Scallywag. You know, the last one we saw, reasonably uneventful up until the point Kupermeister pushed. And honestly, Scallywag should have held, but it was a bit of mismanagement. He had a lot of Marines in the back of his base, idle, that waited a long time before then trying to fight on their own ramp. It was all a bit ugly. Had they joined in the fray sooner, and with slightly better siege tank positioning, you sort of feel that Scallywag could have and should have held. But that's not what we saw. There was also, given how many Marines he had, a distinct lack of medevacs. And I can't emphasize enough just how much difference medevacs make to how effective Marines are. You know, it literally, if you've got one medevac per 8 Marines, it roughly makes each of your Marines worth 3. You know, it is pretty absurd. It's pretty nasty. And Marauders as well. It probably makes one Marauder worth about 20 Marines or something. As far as I've noticed, anytime somebody's having at me with Marauders with medevac support, Marauders are basically indestructible. Nothing kills them. You need about 5 Immortals or something so that you can one-shot them. Broken. I'm just kidding. Marauders are great. They're my favorite. Anyway. Coop is scouting north with the Overlord and has scouted to the right with the drone. So this drone's going to go top right and will very soon confirm that his opponent must be bottom left. The SCV coming down here might throw a bit of a dummy, because if you see this coming out, you might assume that it's come from mining up here, but actually it's also on a scouting pattern. Unfortunate for Scallywag that he's chosen, in fact both of them actually are going to scout their opponent's location last. So as the Overlord comes in, he might catch a whiff of it and realise that it's come from bottom left. But by that time I think the SCV is going to have verified it. So that is a kind of interesting feature of playing on these big 2x2 maps. You know, you don't know exactly where your opponent is going to start, so it just vastly reduces the likelihood of a proxy or anything like that, because most proxy builds require you to get a worker across the map and be building structures in your, you know, near your opponent's base at about the same time as you would build them at home. And obviously if you don't know where your opponent is, that's simply not possible. So you know, Coop in the last game just didn't bother to get speed, and in the end it didn't really matter, because nothing turned up that needed killing, and he didn't really have significant lings in the end battle. I think there was a handful of them, but they ended up ahead of the roaches and just got blasted by siege tanks. So it didn't really matter, because he was doing a sort of roach heavy build with some hydras in the mix too. Scallywag, you know, he's had a rough ride. His first matchup was against Icy Red, and that didn't go so well for Scally. So he's yet to get points on the board in round 4 here, so he could really use a win. This Overlord is going to make it to the high ground with only 1 Marine chasing it. So once it's above here, it can park and the Marine can no longer see it. So he's going to be safe there for the time being. Scallywag going to turn this into the orbital, just continuing to sort of do a pretty standard build with 2 racks down. I don't know if this is an error. There's only 1 SCV in there. It needs to sort that out reasonably quickly, because, you know, once the tech lab, once you're getting stuff researched in the tech lab like STIM, and you want to be building a factory with things out of the factory and a starport, you're going to need slightly more gas than you're going to get from these 4 mining. So Coop, you know, 4 minutes in, it's about time he should be thinking about getting his 3rd up. And on a map like this, once you know the direction your opponent's in, you've got a lot of options. It is really tempting to just throw a base over here. The chances of it being scouted are very, very low, unless your opponent has been incredibly diligent about that. So it is a good map for a ninja, and you can of course expand here. You know, there are attack paths into this, but they're not too bad. With an army positioned here, you can cover your natural, you can cover your 3rd, it's none too shabby. And then you can kind of expand away from your opponent if you so desire to make it harder, certainly it's a lot further for them to come. Now, with that said, the distance between here and here by air is relatively short, and between the third and the main is very short indeed by air, and that can be abused by medevacs. It can be abused by things like mutalisks as well, slightly later in the game. So we'll see if any of that happens. In the meantime, looks 2-1-1-ish. Oh no, it's a double factory again from Scallywag. Yeah, okay, with the double factory, he's definitely going to need to get these gases done fairly rapidly. I'm a little confused as to why there isn't yet a third from Kupermeister. Is this just going to be a big 2-base roach all in? If it is, there aren't really that many, it's 5.5 minutes. Okay, here we go. And it's an aggressive position for the third because it's towards his opponent. And I don't mind that as the Zerg, but you do have to be careful, because look, a medevac from here, full of units, can drop here, boost into here, and just cause you a lot of headaches. Look how much dead space there is out the back that, there's no way hiders or anything can reach a medevac sitting out here. So it is risky. It isn't a straightforward thing to do. It isn't straightforward. You know what I mean? It isn't necessary. It can lead to a more complicated life for you as Zerg. To be honest, it's such a big map. I wouldn't mind seeing the double expo from the Zerg because, always bear in mind, for the Zerg, a hatchery isn't so expensive. Zergs are able to up their mineral income very rapidly and can generally quite quickly recoup the cost of a hatchery, and you tend to feel less attached to your hatcheries when you're playing as Zerg. If you lose a CC, that hurts a bit, especially because you've built the CC, it's cost you 400, and then you've spent money to turn it into an orbital or a planetary, so it's cost you a fair bit, and if it goes down, that's expensive, whereas a hatchery costs you 300, arguably plus the 50 for the worker. So if you lose that, that is a much smaller dent compared to the 550 that you've lost as a Terran player. So I always feel as Zerg, if you've got half a mind to throw it on a hatchery, just do it. Just chuck a hatchery down. It's so easy to saturate. Once you've got 3 bases or whatever, you can just hold down the D button and with 1 round of larva instantly saturate a hatchery. So you can recoup the cost of it very quickly indeed. There isn't much here to defend against Lings running in. These Marines are well out of position in terms of getting siege tank support or anything, and they're going to die pretty quickly. So Scallywag's going to have to give up this position. He is going to have to fly this command center away, and he needs to lift it pretty quickly because if it catches fire, it is going to catch fire. This command center is going to be lost, and again, that just felt unnecessary. What was wrong with a lift up and just fly it out the back here? What are the roaches going to do about that? Literally nothing. Why not save that CC? That was an orbital command, so that's cost them 550 minerals right there. The siege tanks here, not in the worst position. Wouldn't mind them a little bit further forward though, so that they can catch stuff on the ramp. If we look at this siege tank, the stuff's going to be right the way up the ramp before it hits. This one will be hurting things, but not until they're halfway up, and at that point they've got vision of things at the top. So these 2 siege tanks just need to be a couple of hexes forward. This one here and this one here means that this whole ramp is then covered. The Thor coming down, I like. Push this Thor forward. Its range in air can hit these overseers, which is great because that's going to push them away or they will die. And if it pushes them away, that denies vision up the ramp. So another siege tank coming in. Again, these Marines at the back, where are the medevacs for these Marines? You've got to have medevacs. Again, the tank just slightly too far back. Click on your siege tanks. You can see where their range is. Know that you need to cover the bottom of, you need to cover the middle of the ramp so that anything trying to come up here is going to get an absolute beating. Please repair these. Oh, that's so expensive, man. Both of those were not just supply depots, those were supply depots. Oh, you need to dodge the bots. Oh, tries to. It's a little bit sloppy though, a little bit late. Does lose some of the Marines. The siege tanks are putting down some serious hurt, but if they'd have been in that slightly more forward position, that hurt could have been put on before any of these units have fired a shot, and it does look like Scallywag's going to struggle to clean this up. I'm not sure what this siege tank is doing. What is he doing there? Why isn't he here? And as for this Banshee, please get that in the mix, because that could be having a field day. And he's even got Cloak for that. So if he can pick off the Overseers, the Zerg is defenseless against that Cloak Banshee. He isn't going to pick off anything at this rate. He's hurt both of the Overseers, killed neither of them, which is about the worst possible result. There's Marines standing idle. Once again, it felt very much like that could have been held had Scallywag had slightly better positioning and had medevac. Medevac support, so important. Please pull the Thor back. Again, mistakes being made still, not dodging the corrosive bars, not pulling back the damaged units, just keeping them at the front. They're always going to die. This siege tank, weirdly does end up killing 7 units. Who'd have thunk? But there's still a Banshee parked here. Finally does Cloak, but look, the Overseers are still alive. I don't know. I feel like those should have been the first things to die from the Thor that was standing here minutes ago, and could have just cleaned those up so easily. And then you can put your siege tanks wherever you like and just wreck the stuff on the low ground. However, it's not what happened, and Scallywag still has yet to get a point on the board. And Kupermeister bags another 2. GG.